What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Anthony, director, actor, and cinematographer. And today I want to talk about something important if you're any sort of creative in any sort of creative field. And that is the idea of having, inspiration or people to look up to whose work you really appreciate and you kind of either want to emulate or take and run with what they're doing and make it your own. So in this video, I want to share some of my inspirations in the filmmaking world. And while these are going to be filmmaking inspirations, I encourage you, if you're in any sort of creative field, whether it be art or music, literature, anything like that, to find your own inspirations and people that you can look up to and learn from. So let's get started with a few of my inspirations in the filmmaking industry. The first one that I want to talk about is Orson Welles. Now, if you don't know who Orson is one of the masterminds behind the recent sci-fi epic, The Creator. And what I really appreciate about Orson is a few things. A, he's a young guy, and I love seeing young people in the film industry. But what I really appreciate about Orson is his ability to use innovative tools and techniques in order to make these huge budget films for little to no money. Now, if you know anything about the film The Creator, the big news story with that film was that it was filmed on an FX3, which is a camera that you can go pick up right now at Best Buy or B&H Photo, wherever you get your gear. And so the fact that Orson was able to take this camera and shoot a huge sci-fi epic on this camera is pretty amazing. Now, he did have help from his crew and from his mentor, Greg Fraser, who we're going to get into a little bit here in a minute. But that's just one of the things that I really appreciate about Oren's offer. Now, I mentioned Greg Fraser. So Greg Fraser was also involved with the film The Creator, but he's also known for a lot of other films. Maybe a little film that you may not have heard of called Dune and Dune Part 2. So Greg is actually Oren's mentor. And one of the things that I appreciate about Greg Fraser is just kind of the texture that he puts into every frame and the subtle realness and kind of you almost feel like there's no lighting or no set or no anything, especially in Dune. And so this is one of the things that I aspire to do when I'm creating a film or setting up a shot. I want the lighting and I want the composition. I want everything to just seem natural. And specifically, Dune is a huge movie, right? And one of the cool things that they did with this movie, if you've seen it, specifically in Dune 2, was with the riding of the sandworm. And so this is a big VFX shot. There's a lot of moving parts to make this happen. But Greg and the team were really adamant to make sure that they were doing a lot of it in frame practically. And one thing that really caught my attention and that I try to do now in my filmmaking practice is if you're going to do something like that, shoot it as if you were actually shooting it in real life. So what do I mean by this? Obviously, there's not giant sandworms that we can go out and film, but they filmed it almost documentary style, right? As if, okay, if these sandworms were real, how would we film someone writing this, right? We would have to get on the worm with them and hold the camera and keep it steady. And so the idea of this is that because you film it as if you're really doing it, it gives you this sense of realism that you just can't get if you're trying to plan out the shots and make them super quote unquote cinematic. So that's just one thing that I really appreciate about Greg and about Orson is their whole mindset revolves around how can we make our production as simple as possible, but also as realistic as possible. Now, the next filmmaker I want to get into is kind of in the same vein as the first two, and that's Gareth Edwards. Now, if you don't know who Gareth is, he was also involved with The Creator, but also films such as Rogue One and Monsters. And one of the things that I appreciate about Gareth is his ability to kind of wear multiple hats in a production, right? So Gareth Edwards comes from a VFX background. And because of this, when he's shooting movies such as Rogue One or Creator or even Monsters, he has the ability to look at the frame, look at what they're filming, and look at it from a VFX standpoint and kind of make decisions based off of that, which really pay off in the end in terms of the realism of the look and what they're able to accomplish on a small budget, right? He also is a great director and cinematographer. And so watching his films, they all seem so cohesive, right? The VFX seem to just fit into the flow of everything. They're not in your face. It looks really real, but also the directing and the composition choices, the cinematography, everything is cohesive. And a great example of this is if you go and watch the short film that they created to pitch The Creator, Gareth basically just picked up a camera and went traveling around the world filming these plates, and then did a lot of the VFX himself, had some help, of course, from ILM and other studios, to put robots and other sci-fi elements into each frame. And so what you get is this, I think it's 10 to 12 minutes, comment down below if I'm not correct, 10 to 12 minute short film that was a pitch of, hey, this is the creator, this is kind of what we want to make. But he was able to do all of that on his own for the most part because he had this background and this knowledge of the technical and the creative. So when it comes to Gareth Edwards, kind of the man, the myth, the legend, he's able to wear multiple hats and get the shots that he needs in a quick and efficient way. Now, the next two I want to talk about are going to be more titans in the industry, right? And these are two guys that I look up to a great deal. And the first one is going to be Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan, I started watching from a very young age, and it all started with the Batman series. We're talking Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises. And what I appreciated about these films is their best way to describe it is they're just clean. Right? You watch a Christopher Nolan film and you feel like everything is cohesive, everything is just prim and polished. And I really appreciate that about his films. The other thing I appreciate about his films specifically is their tone, right? The tone is going to be a little darker. We're experiencing the character on more of a psychological level, and he's not afraid to kind of explore the depths of the human psyche. And I think that's one of the first things I really appreciated specifically about the Batman series is up until this point, Batman had been Bruce Wayne, the, iconic superhero from DC. And for the first time, we really got to see Bruce Wayne as kind of a battered person. We really saw into his psyche, into what he was going through emotionally. And now moving into the future Batman movies, all of them kind of explore this theme. So Christopher Nolan was one of the first to do that, in my opinion. The other thing I really appreciate about Nolan films is their ability to play with time, right? You think of Inception, and I think the biggest one that you think of is Tenet when you think about playing with time. He's not afraid to mess with the standard story structure and linear storytelling in order to create a more interesting and dynamic film. I think Tenet was probably the biggest example of this where, half the movie is in reverse. But if you think about other films like Memento, Inception even, he loves to play with time. And I really appreciate this from a filmmaking perspective. And it's something that I aspire to do with my films is play with time, play with the story structure, play with what the audience knows and what they don't know in order to make a more exciting and gripping film. Now, David Fincher is another director that I look up to and another filmmaker that I really appreciate. And it's twofold, right? I love his directing style where he's a big proponent of doing things multiple times over and over again. There are stories on The Social Network and The Killer, those films where he's doing 100 takes for one scene. And the reason I like this is from my acting background, right? We all know that, you've got Meisner, right, was a big proponent of this, of doing things over and over again until they become in your body and they become almost habitual and they become part of you to where you're not even thinking about it anymore. You're just living in the moment and reacting naturally. And so this is something that David Fincher really loves to hone in on his actors when they're on set. They'll do 100 takes so that by the 100th take, if I'm supposed to put my coat on the couch of my home, it really looks like I'm putting my coat down because now it really feels like my home because I've done it 100 times already. So when you're watching a David Fincher film, there's sort of this feeling you get when you see the actors that they're more settled, they're in their body. And that's just something I really appreciate about a Fincher film. The other thing I appreciate about David Fincher is he's not afraid to use new technology for storytelling, right? David Fincher was one of the first to kind of move to digital cameras when they came out for filmmaking. He's a big proponent of using what we call hidden VFX, whether it's lens flares or creative color grading or kind of warping an image in a weird way to give it a sort of look. He's not afraid to use the new technology that's coming out to push the story forward. And so I think that's really cool. And it's exciting to see kind of what comes next in terms of technology, right? We've got huge things coming down the pipeline with virtual production, immersive content, you name it. So it'll be interesting to see what David Fincher does with these new technologies coming in the future. But I'm sure he's already planning on what he's going to do with them. So if you watch a David Fincher film, be on the lookout for those things where he's kind of crafting the image, crafting the frame with things that you may not necessarily notice, but they are things that he's putting in post and using new technologies in order to achieve that look. One of the last filmmakers that really inspires me is an oldie but a goodie, and that's Orson Welles. Now, Orson Welles is probably noted as one of the top storytellers, one of the top filmmakers that there ever has been, and that's for good reason. But one of the things that really inspires me about Orson Welles is his first film, Citizen Kane. Now, I know a lot of people talk about Citizen Kane as being one of the best movies ever, one of the best well-written, one of the best directed, all of those things. But what really fascinates me about this is that not only did he direct the film, but he also starred in the film as well. Now, take a minute to think about that. If you're a director or an actor or both, then you know how challenging it is to not only direct, not only act, but now you're doing both at the same time. And you're directing yourself in front of the lens while you're also having to think about being behind the lens, but you're also giving a great performance in front of the lens. It's mind-bending for anyone to think about. And so he gave a great performance in Citizen Kane. It's well written, it's well directed. And so that's something that really inspires me moving forward as an actor, as a director, as a cinematographer, is one day getting to that level where I can direct a film while also being in it, while also making sure that it's cinematic, but still making sure that each piece is getting done to the highest quality. My recent short film, Because It Must, was kind of one of my first fortes into this, where I wrote it, I directed it, I was the star of it, and I did all of the VFX and editing for the film. When it comes out, I'll make sure to release it on here. But like I said, it's still going through some film festivals at the moment. But that was one of the most challenging experiences of my life. Even though it was a short film, I was responsible for a lot of the pre and post production of this film. And so I can only imagine back in the day when Citizen Kane was being produced, with the technology that they had and the resources that they had, being able to pull off a production like that, both behind the lens and in front of the lens, is super inspiring to me. And so that's something that I aspire to be one day as an artist, as a director, and I work every day to get there. So these are just a few of my favorite cinematographers, directors, filmmakers, and people who I really look up to in my own filmmaking practice, and really try to use their frames, their films, in order to either emulate myself or to use as inspiration so that I can be more creative in my filmmaking endeavors as well. And if you have a specific filmmaker that you really think I should look into, or that other people should look into to kind of help further their craft of filmmaking, leave a comment down below so that we can all learn from your tips and tricks. And if you like this kind of video, don't forget to like and subscribe and click that bell icon down below so you stay notified for future videos coming down the pipeline. As always, I'm Anthony. Go out there and make something cool. I dare you.